Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's on My Desk. Today I decided to bring out the big guns, and by big guns I don't necessarily mean super complicated pieces, but I mean pieces that are next to impossible, if not impossible to find, that you end up paying about twice its retail value. And who else but Richard Mille that demands those kind of premiums on their watches, and these are probably the two most sought after Richard Milles out there today. I brought the Todt RM1103 as well as the McLaren RM1103. Wanted to compare them side by side, and well, actually not compare them side by side, I just wanted to show you both of them. These again are some of the most sought after RM pieces out there today. In fact, I would probably say these are the most sought after Richard Milles out there today, and hence they trade at the price that they trade. I'm going to put the two side by side first and foremost just to show you the two watches together. At a glance, they look the same with the exception of a different color, but I will get into some details later that will show you that indeed they are somewhat different in terms of their design. You have your McLaren on the left, I call this one Tony the Tiger watch, and you have the Todt on the right, I call this one the Papa Smurf watch. And rightfully so, because Tony the Tiger stripes as well as the bright blue color that would match Papa Smurf. Let's see if that actually makes sense. Papa Smurf, Tony the Tiger.
They're great!
RM11 McLaren, RM11 Todt. Let's first talk about the difference between this RM11 and its next generation, the RM1103. You had the RM1101, which was your standard flyback chronograph. You had the RM1102, which was your flyback chronograph with a GMT function. And finally, you have the RM1103. And I'll grab the Tony the Tiger watch, aka the McLaren, just to sort of go over some of the differences. Now, first and foremost, this is still a flyback chronograph. This still has the variable rotor adjustment to allow to adjust the watch for your lifestyle, whether you're active or not so active. And I talked about this in a different episode when I spoke about RM11 Mancini, I believe. So the difference here is really how they dress the watch up. It's been 10 years since the RM11 came out, and Richard Mille said to him, you know what, I think it's time for a makeover. And makeover the watch is exactly what they did. I happen to be wearing an RM11 Mancini on my wrist today, so I'm going to put the two side by side, or rather the three side by side, just to show you the differences. It's a hell of a makeover, and again, I guess it's a bad example to bring out the Todt as well as the McLaren next to us, just a standard titanium RM11 Mancini, because again of the bright colors. But if you can sort of imagine this watch in titanium, you see the key differences right away. The watch is larger. It's larger by a whopping 2 millimeters, which seems like not a big deal, but if you look at the watch side by side, it does seem a lot larger, and mainly due to the fact that they came out with sort of this ribbed, I call it, case design. And by ribbed case design, you sort of see that at every screw on the case front, you sort of see that bump out on the side, and I think it's better to see it this way. If I turn the watch this way, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, where the regular RM11 does not have this sort of that even key side of the watch versus these bump outs. And they repeat the bump outs in the back as well, exactly where each screw is. And that's really the only thing that makes the watch 2 millimeters larger. As far as movement is concerned, again, same flyback chronograph, same month display between 4 and 5, the same exact buckle design. If you look at the buckle, it looks exactly the same to that of the original RM11. Design principles, again, the same. They use the same principles as they do in F1 racing, precision watchmaking. On his website, Richard Mille says, and I quote, "We make watches you can wear for any occasion, just as McLaren creates cars that can be driven on a daily basis. We don't do watches to put in a safe waiting for the next generation." And with that said, let's talk about the McLaren. Now, rumor has it you can only get this watch if you buy the new McLaren that just came out. I'm not so sure about that because I know guys that have bought this watch without buying the McLaren. So what makes this watch a McLaren? Look at it. It's fairly obvious. It's the design of the watch. The bright orange color is certainly a color that could represent McLaren, but that's not really what this watch is all about. Look at the chronograph pushers. If you look at the chronograph pushers and you know the car, you'll notice that the chronograph pushers look exactly like the headlights. Obviously, the crown looks like the wheel. If you look further, where it says McLaren on the bottom and the top, those mimic the air intakes of the car. Other than that, It's an RM1103 flyback chronograph with a month display and a large date display. If you look at the movement in the back, and I'll show you the movement in the back of the Mancini, let me just take it off. You'll notice the movement is identical, even at a first glance, without really even having to take it apart and looking what's inside. Look at that. Two of the same exact machines. And the machines look identical. 500 pieces made. It's a hefty limited edition, especially in comparison to the Jean Todt, which they only made 150 pieces of. And I think the whole hype about getting the car and then therefore getting the watch made this watch climb through the roof. Now, there's no in between with this watch. People either hate it or they love it. In my case, I absolutely love the watch because I like stuff that's different. And this is very different, again, mainly due to the case design, which is made from TPT. I talked about NTPT, North Ply Thin Technologies, is the company that exclusively makes these watches for Richard Mille. I should say watch cases for Richard Mille. You'll notice that even in the design of mixing carbon TPT layered with an orange resin, which is specifically created, again, for Richard Mille, you'll note that even by combining the two materials and considering that this is a resin, note the perfect 45-degree angle at every single orange line on the side of the case, and that sort of repeats throughout as we go to the back of the case. I mean, it's super precise when it comes to mixing this stuff. Each layer is only 45 microns. Now, I'm not a mathematician, and I don't exactly remember the micron conversion, but let's ask Siri. Hey, Siri, how many millimeters is 45 microns?
45 micrometers is 0.045 millimeters.
So roughly about a half a millimeter. That's pretty damn thin. Let's talk value. The retail on this watch is about $165,000 if I'm not mistaken. Resale value, how about $325,000? That's absolutely nuts. That's double its retail value. The only other watches out there that I know of today that trade at twice their retail value, the 41 millimeter skeleton Royal Oak, the double balance, that trades at about twice its retail value. The titanium Schumacher's pushing that number. And of course, the other one would be the Jean Todt RM1103, which I'm going to talk about next. A limited edition of 150 pieces. What is this watch commemorating? It's commemorating the 50th year anniversary of a gentleman by the name of Jean Todt, the president of FIA, International Automotive Generation, a guy that's been at the helm of Peugeot, at the helm of Ferrari, and who's been probably one of the most successful men when it comes to F1 racing in the world of Ferrari. I can go on and on about Jean Todt. If you're into car racing, if you're into Formula One, he's an iconic figure when it comes to that. And rightfully so, that Richard Mille should make a tribute watch to this wonderful individual who's done so much for the world of car racing, for the world of cars in general. They align themselves perfectly because, again, Richard Mille, since the very beginning, has been screaming in terms of their production, how they produce their watches, and they always align themselves with F1 precision, making of an F1 car, racing an F1 car. And they, their slogan has always been a racing machine on your wrist, and rightfully so. The amount of time and effort that goes into innovation, that goes into making these watches, that goes into putting them together and making them so precise, it does, in my opinion, align with F1 racing. So a great individual to commemorate, and I don't really see a better watch to do it with than this RM11 Jean Todt. Not sure why they picked the color blue. I think they just wanted to do something different, so they did pick the blue TPT to use for this particular case. Now the McLaren is predominantly black with the orange accent, with this watch is actually predominantly blue with sort of the lighter white or cream accents, as I would call them. Now, this watch doesn't have any particularities that stand out, kind of like the McLaren that mimics any particular car, and rightfully so. This was to commemorate a human, not a vehicle. So it basically looks like your standard RM1103 in titanium or rose gold, same pusher, same crown, same exact case. Again, same exact functionality. It's a flyback chrono, same exact movement. Large date at 12 o'clock, the month display between 4 and 5. Same pushers as your standard RM11s as well as the crown, and same exact buckle. Retail price, again, I mentioned, is around $165,000. I think it came out the door at $150,000. I think then they later changed the price to $165,000. This is probably a much harder watch to get even than the McLaren, and the reason for that is because they made 500 of these and they only made 150 of these. Trading price, last one was sold at $320,000, again, at twice its retail price tag. Ask yourself a question, is it worth it? Is this watch worth $320,000 or $300,000? Let's round it down. And the answer is simple. I do believe that Richard Mille watches are worth the retail value that Richard Mille is asking for them. Why are they trading at so much? Well, right now, arguably, these are the most sought after pieces out there. The production numbers are so low. You can't walk into a boutique and buy one of these. You'd be on a long waiting list, and odds are you won't get it. Those that did receive these watches at retail prices at the boutiques are those clients that have probably bought numerous Richard Milles before, that were around before the whole crazy hype started, when they were buying regular stuff, before these watches were going through the roof, sort of staying loyal to the company. And for an average Joe, well, I shouldn't really call you an average Joe if you're out there buying a $300,000 watch, but if you're an average Joe that can afford a $300,000 watch, you're paying just that. You're paying a premium. Will this end? Will these watches crash in value? I've told you guys before, I don't have a crystal ball, and I talked about how I feel about the Richard Mille and whether or not it's the next bubble. And I'll put the link up there somewhere so you guys can check that video out. I don't think so. The way Richard Mille is going and the direction that Richard Mille is taking by making super innovative pieces, by making something that does not exist on the market, that doesn't look like any other watch out there, he's going to continue staying successful because he's going to keep the production numbers low, and he's going to continue keeping the quality of these timepieces high. And anyone always wants a Richard Mille. You guys have asked me in the past whether I've sold watches to celebrities, and I mentioned, yes, I've sold plenty. I don't mention any names. And guess what watches they're buying today? They're buying Richard Milles and Audemars Piguet. And the first thing they ask me when they call up or text me or send me a WhatsApp is they say, hey, Roman, what RMs do you have in stock? And this is why I invest into these timepieces. And believe me, I'm not buying them much below the $300,000 mark. I told you before, we're working about a 5 to 10% margin on these pieces. And oftentimes I end up working on even less when it comes to pieces such as these, because these are it. It doesn't get any hotter. It doesn't get any harder to get, and I will not keep these in stock. In fact, this is already sold, and this is already on hold. So by the time this video airs, most likely, actually not most likely, most definitely 2 of these pieces are going to be on someone's wrist. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Last but not least, I usually end it with what's on my wrist, but you guys already saw it. It was the Mancini Overtime that I was wearing, and I actually put this watch on purpose rather than randomly, just to kind of give you a contrast between the old RM11 versus the new. If you got any questions, comment below. As always, if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys next time for more watch reviews and other videos.